Hi, we're going to continue our discussion of JavaScript, jQuery, and loading data from web APIs. And in the last video, I asked you to make an account on OpenWeatherMap and get your API key from OpenWeatherMap, okay? And so if you've done that, now we can use that to make a call to the OpenWeatherMap API here and get the data to show up on our web page. A quick discussion of how we're going to do that, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to use jQuery's AJAX method. Okay, and the AJAX is an acronym that stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So asynchronous means that this doesn't happen at the same time. You know, a synchronous call means that things have to happen in order and you have to wait for one thing to finish before you can move on to something else. Making an asynchronous call to load data means that our program can continue running while we load the data in the background, and then at some time in the future when the data is finished loading, it'll call us back and let us know that it's finished, and then we can take action at that point, okay? So asynchronous JavaScript, well, we're going to use JavaScript to load the data, right? And, well, we don't need to explain that. XML, right? Well, what is XML? Well, XML is another format similar to JSON. It looks a lot like HTML, and XML existed before JSON. So at the time that they came up with this AJAX acronym, you know, there wasn't anything called JSON. So you know, it just says XML in here. Everybody was loading data through XML. Really, the AJAX method here just loads data as text. So we can just load anything. The format really doesn't matter. So the XML is really, you know, irrelevant. This could be JSON, it could be text, it could be, you know, anything, right? So that's what AJAX is, right? When you load data over the internet, you're going to use one of the HTTP methods. Now, the HTTP methods are methods that we specify to the browser as to how we're going to transfer the data, okay? And the two methods are get and post, okay? And jQuery provides the AJAX method, but it also provides a get function and a post function. And normally when you're using AJAX, you need to specify which method, get or post, that you're using to transfer your data. If you use jQuery's get method, then you're saying specifically that you're going to use the get system or the HTTP get method, and you don't need to specify it in the call. And post is the same way. So if you use the post, it's kind of a helper that's like a helper function for the AJAX function. So really we're just using AJAX, but we're using the post method when we do the transfer, right? And the same goes for get, right? So get is just a helper for AJAX, but it specifies for us that we're using get. So we're going to use the get method here. So get takes a couple parameters. The first parameter is the path. The second parameter is any variables that you want to send, okay? And then the third method is a callback. And the callback method is a function. So you type a function in here. You can use a function name if you've defined a function somewhere else, or you can just write a closure here like this, right? And this function takes one parameter, data. So this variable, when the function gets called, this variable will contain the data that was just loaded. So when we load data off the internet, when this function, this callback function is called on, this variable will contain the data that we loaded. Okay, so then we can deal with data inside the code block here. We can do something with it. Okay, so we're not going to send any. Actually, we're going to send variables, but we're actually not going to send them this way. We're going to just attach them to the end of the path right here. And you can do that when you're using the get method. If you're using post, you have to put the variables here. Okay. So anyway, so I'm going to take out this middle parameter because we're not going to use it in this example. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take our path right here, and this is the path that I got from the OpenWeatherMap site, and I showed this to you in the last video. Essentially, it says, you know, HTTP API openweathermap.org, data 2.5 weather Q, and then Q equals, and then you'll put in the name of a city here, and then and the ampersand, API ID equals, and then you'll put your API key on the end here, okay? Let me actually put a comment there, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just paste this right here, right? So that's my call, right? And we're going to call on, you know, call on the API with London as the city, okay? And then it's going to call us back inside the closure here, and I'm going to put a line return there in between the curly brackets, so we'll get our data here. And what we can do is we can type in console.log, and we can log the data to the console. So I'll save that, and then I'll go back to my browser here. This is my index file right there, and I'll refresh it. Oops, I didn't mean to save it. It's a Command R and refresh. And if we look in the console, so I'll open up the inspector here and go to the console there, what you'll see is you'll see that we loaded this object, right? And if I look at the object and I open it up here, you can see it has a whole bunch of data. So it says base, stations, clouds, all, you know, and then it's got COD 200. That means this is you know, an error code that says, hey, everything's okay. And then it says coordinates, and it provides latitude, longitude, and then it's got main. And under main, you can see we've got humidity, pressure, temperature, temperature minimum, temperature maximum. These temperatures are in Kelvin, so that's why the numbers look so high. It's really not 278 degrees here. And the name is London, and then system, and then it gives me the system ID with a bunch of other information, right? And there's wind speed right there. 30 degrees, 4.1 miles per hour, I guess. But anyway, there we go, right? So if you get this, then everything's working for you, right? Let's take one quick look at the OpenWeatherMap site and take a look at their API. So, you know, when I'm on API right now under current weather data, okay? And if I scroll down a little bit here, you'll see that it says API respond, and this is pretty much the JSON data that we just saw in the console, even though this is not quite as organized. It was a little more organized in the console. And if we keep going, you'll see that they give you a pretty good description of what the parameters are. It says weather parameters in API respond. Should be response, right? And if we go down a little bit further, you'll see it says parameters, and then this shows you what all the parameters are. So it gives me coordinates, it gives me weather with ID main. So really this will be a weather object, and inside here there'll be other properties, right? And then it says, you know, base, and then it says main, and then it gives me some other properties here. And then there's wind, and then there's clouds and rain. Let me note that you get most of these properties all the time. Sometimes some of the properties don't show up. Like, for example, rain doesn't always show up, and snow doesn't always show up. So, you know, for example, if I go back to this one, you can see that, you know, rain is not in here, and neither is snow. So those ones don't always show up. And I've noticed that when you get the wind property, for some cities, every once in a while, it'll say gusts. So if there's gusts of wind in that city, it'll show up as a parameter here. But it doesn't always show up, okay? But anyway, you should be getting something like this, okay? And if you've got that, then you've got everything working and good for you. So we'll continue in the next video on how to use this, okay? So thanks for watching.